Yep.
Look at Alex here. Be quiet. Right. Okay. So we'll kick off. Thanks everybody for joining us. This is, I think, now our fourth virtual edition of this London VMUG. So, obviously, unfortunately, we can't do this face to face like we would usually. So we are trying to do the next best thing and doing it via Zoom. For anybody who can't drive PowerPoint, so for anybody who hasn't been here before, okay, so myself, Linda, Chris, Dave, and Gareth are essentially the team bringing this event to you today. We've got a slightly lighter agenda than maybe we would usually have today, and we'll look at that in a second. But so, so just full disclosure, right? So Linda does work for VMware, but is our essentially kind of rep into VMware and was actually part of the committee before she joined VMware. So she does a lot of work really doing some of our liaison at the moment with VMware, which really isn't in her day job. So, we're very grateful for her to be able to do that. So we're here to really talk about interesting things from VMware, right? So we're not here to sell you anything. There really is no sales agenda. Nobody tells us what to put on. We go to VMware, we ask for specific topics, and we ask for topics from the community. So with the exception, say, of one, we are literally all volunteers in doing this, and we're here really just to look for some interesting content. In terms of some rough practicalities today, this is slightly different because obviously we're doing this over Zoom. We've been doing this for a year now, so I'm pretty sure everybody gets this, and I'd rather not play mute police today. But when we got one of the sessions running, please do make sure you're muting your mic and not going to the toilet or running the kettle during the session, because it can be very distracting. Likewise, if you've got any audio problems, I mean, I have to say, generally it's probably going to be your end, but if you do think there's a serious problem and you can't fix it, ping us in the chat and we'll see what we can do, and we'll see whether other people are running into the same issue. Whatever we're talking about here is essentially for public consumption, right? If you do have something that you think or you don't wish people to share further, because people here do use Twitter, please make sure you just make that very clear in what you're talking about. The hashtag for today is the #LundVMUG. So if you're still using Twitter, as we were saying, every time we have this meeting, it's a declining number of people doing so. But if you do, feel free to tweet us on that hashtag. These are our set of dates for the rest of the year. So by this point, we've already completed 2020. These dates here are the dates for the London VMUG for 2021. If you check the vmug.com site, there will also be dates there for the other VMUG groups around the UK. I mean, given that you can attend these virtually, you may be interested in doing so. Right now, we have a provisional date of November the 25th for UKVMUG, which is traditionally our large, several hundred people in-person event. I think it's fairly safe to say it's probably going to be online this year. We may, by that point, be able to run a small in-person event, but I think on balance, we will probably be running it online. So if you just treat that as a save the date for now, we will be sharing details a bit closer to the time. Speaking of that, we do have a YouTube channel, which the URLs at the bottom, so you can get to and see footage from, I think, videos that go all the way back to 2014. And I did have a look last night, actually, and some of those videos have had a very large amount of views, which was quite cool to see. So there is still some really interesting content there. Obviously, the version numbers will have moved on and changed, but there's definitely some useful content there. Plus, we do have the recordings from the event we ran last year. And also the recordings of the previous London sessions are also on the same YouTube channel. So you might just have to filter slightly differently to find the London events, but they are there and they're visible as well. So things as ever, kind of some interesting things in the news since we met in November or December, whenever it was last year. So recently announced, I'm sure you'll have seen, right? So Pat Gelsinger is leaving VMware. So he's currently VMware CEO. He's moving off to Intel. And if you were part of the kind of chat we had a little bit earlier, there's maybe some interesting things that at least we'd like to see come out of that kind of relationship. So Jeff Bezos, who runs Amazon, has announced yesterday, I think it was, that he's standing down, and Andy Jassy's taking over his role. So it'll be interesting. I think they've just reached what, $100 billion quarter I mean, if you just take a moment to think what that is, that's mind-boggling amount of money, and I think our household has probably contributed to a significant percentage of that. So I just noticed I can't spell announced, so that's interesting. So VMware have just announced a set of conferences for the 2021 for this year. So likewise, these are all going to be online, as I understand it. So interesting, particularly to see an event based around carbon black. So we've got some content on carbon black a bit later, and I have to say I think it's a really interesting technology that VMware acquired a few years ago. That's obviously now starting to make its way into serious product and product offering. So it's interesting to see there's an entire conference around that. So I think that's one I will definitely try and attend. 3 VMworlds on the surface of it, right? So, but if you look at it in reality, there will be one main VMworld event in October, which is going to run, I presume, is an around the clock. So I am imagining a similar form to last year, but we'll wait to see the dates. But if you want to treat that as a save the date for now. Obviously, interesting in offering in China and Japan, and I guess that's really around language localization, that they have their own offering there. So, and Zoom fatigue is definitely a thing, right? As we were talking about earlier, if you've been on lots of these virtual events, we'd really like to thank you all for turning up, because that's we can't really do these events, and it's kind of pointless if people don't turn up. But it's, I know there are a lot of these things going on, and there's a lot of choice, so we do really appreciate people coming along. So for today, this is what our agenda looks like. We're in the kind of blathering welcome bit at the beginning at the moment. First up, we've got a session around the Horizon Cloud Service. We've got a short break. What we'll try and do in the break is similar as we normally do. We kind of encourage everybody to turn their webcams on if you can, and we'll just have a bit of a chat, as kind of trying to emulate as best as possible what we would do when we have one of our in-person meetings. Session following on VMware Cloud Foundation. Lunch, I'm afraid, is a bring your own lunch affair. So, but feel free to grab your lunch, come back, turn your camera on, and we'll shoot the breeze while we're doing that. Then we've got what I think is going to be a really interesting session on carbon black, and I'm definitely quite excited about this one, particularly where we're looking at doing a live demo. Right, this is something we always try and encourage presenters to come and do live content. Similarly, following that break, and then we're going to wrap up. So a slightly shorter agenda than we would normally run. We're going to wrap up at around 4 o'clock with a session, or following a session around Tanzu from Dean Lewis and Michael Cade. Right. So again, another really interesting new technology, new year-old maybe, and new technology with some interesting content there. And then we will do it might be a little bit early in the day if we're wrapping at 4 for V beers, depending on what time zone you're in. But if you feel free to grab beer, coffee, orange juice, whatever your poison is, and we'll sit and have a chat. Because we're doing this virtually, right? So literally it costs us nothing other than the Zoom account. So we don't really have an official sponsor for this, other than ourselves providing our time. So we'd like to thank everybody. So VMUG isn't here to sell you something, although VMUG does sell one thing. And the reason I have this in here is I think it is really useful. And if you look at it for the price of $200 or a couple of GameStop shares, depending on when you got in, it gives you a whole bunch of discounts off various events, training from VMware. But I think really, and I've tried to call out here, the best thing you get from this is the eval experience offering, right? So if you run your own home lab, or maybe even a cloud lab these days with some of this software, you'll get a full year-long evaluation license for all the products you see here. And actually the list may have been refreshed slightly since this, because this slide's from last year, but I would encourage you to go and check it out if you don't have one already. Definitely useful for your home lab. So just out of interest, what we'd like to try and do is find out who's furthest away today from where we are. So obviously we're based in London in the UK. If you're joining us from somewhere around the world, if you want to tweet us using the London VMUG hashtag, telling us where you are, if you can, take a photo out the window, because I don't think I've seen anything else other than a view out of my window for the last year. So I'd definitely be interested to see what you can see. And for the best one, we got a prize at the end of the day. I think it's fair to say we can't put on this event without speakers, right? So, and it's whilst the majority of speakers today are from VMware, you know, we do invest a lot of time and effort in trying to find speakers from the community to come and talk to us about the things that they are doing, you know, in their professional lives, things that they're doing in their home lab, other things that are of interest potentially to a technical community. So we do run this kind of continual call for papers, and really we try and treat this as an ongoing backlog of potential presentation topics. Now, you don't have to be the most seasoned presenter in the world. I mean, honestly, I'm a particular amateur at this, right? So if you want to propose a topic, you know, use the URL, give us a kind of rough idea of the topic, and we'll help you get to the point where you can present. So we're quite happy to do, you know, dry runs, some coaching. We can certainly provide some advice. So, you know, even if you think you maybe not your presentation skills are a bit rusty or you need some help, don't let that be a blocker. Please do get in touch. You know, you don't necessarily have to have, you know, and I always use this example, maybe you need to find a better one, right? But you don't have to have, you know, a huge data center to say something of interest, right? I think, and to be honest, we find a lot of the more popular sessions are people who do things in their home lab. You know, I've done in the past, you know, we've had certainly other folks here. I mean, Gareth was here on our last meeting for the UK one, talking about some stuff he'd done with Raspberry Pi, you know, and running a very dangerous live no safety net demo, right? So, but those things are really interesting. Got some brilliant feedback and exposure from that. I mean, there were at least several hundred views of the video of that following that as well. So I'd encourage you to get in touch. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter.
So we've got to the end of today's session. We've made it through yet another day of lockdown, and been some great content. And I think there was actually, certainly through at least 3 of the sessions, a common thread where if you are going to be thinking about moving some of your applications into a modern style, whether that's through refactoring them, through redeploying them, that there are considerations to doing it. It's not just about taking application X and chopping it up and turning it into application X Kubernetes edition. You've got to be able to back it up. You've got to be able to protect it and maintain it, and you've got to be able to secure it. And a lot of the, certainly 2 of the things that we saw from Dan with Carbon Black, and from Michael and Dean with Caston, are just as important as being able to actually get the application there. In fact, I'd say they're more important. You need to get those in place before you even start doing any of the clever refactoring as part of that transformation effort. So I guess that's probably as close to a theme as we got for the day. If we have got any suggestions of themed sessions and things that people would like to see in some of the upcoming meetings, we can do our best to try and put together a program which will talk about some of those. And in fact, Dean stole one of my slides, so I'll be able to jump over it fairly quickly. About the VMUG is very much it's about you as users, and the content that you bring is as important as actually it's more important than the content that our sponsors, whether they be VMware or whether they be sponsors from the rest of the ecospace. But today's session has been recorded. I think it is probably currently still being live streamed. I don't have access to turn that off, so sorry for those on the stream. You've got to listen to me. But what we will be doing, yeah, it worked. What we will be doing is chopping some of the sessions up and sort of editing out all of the sort of the bits in between, and they will be up as individual videos on our YouTube channel. YouTube channel still doesn't actually have an official short URL, but it should have one hopefully in the future. I think we've got just enough subscribers, and I've always wanted to say this, but yeah, please do hit like, follow, and subscribe. But yeah, it's great to be able. It's one of the, I suppose, the advantages of having the virtual ones is it makes it easier to record. We always tried to record some of the sessions when we had them in London, but the proposed recording equipment they had there never really seemed to work. So this is probably actually an easier way of doing it. But if you have an idea, something you'd like to speak about yourselves, Then we have a URL, which Simon mentioned at the beginning, that our call for papers, even if it's just an idea and you want a bit of help with the content, myself, any of the other leaders are more than happy to sort of mentor around the speaking. We've done it before at the UKVMUG with the V Factor ones, but we can also do it without having to bribe people. Stranger things have happened. But yeah, if you do have any ideas, then please do submit them, or just come and speak to one of us as the leaders. In terms of our next meetings and what's coming up in the future, 2020 all done. 2021 we're a third of the way through for the London ones. The next one is surprisingly soon. It's only really 6 weeks away, which is good. We've better get on with the agenda for that one. And then we have the 15th of July. They're all going to be virtual, as you would imagine. UKVMUG is still to be determined as to where it's going to be, whether it's going to be a bit of a hybrid event, whether it's going to be just online. So the things are a little bit up in the air on that one. But as soon as we know, we'll pass it on. If you did miss out on the UK event, it was recorded, so we have there's plenty of great sessions up, including I think some of the sessions from our virtual event at the end of last year. So thank you very much. And one of the good things is we don't really have to go too far to the pub for VBeers. VBeers is pretty much where you're sat. The disadvantage is that you have to provide your own alcohol for it. We'll try and maybe do some goodie boxes for July, depending on whether we can get some sponsors. Wouldn't it be lovely if someone, maybe one of backup company, could help sponsor some beers for that?
This is awkward.
Awkward silence. But yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Really, it's great that even when I know that people are living their lives on Zoom, and even I had a bit of a moan this morning that actually trying to find some energy to socialize on Zoom as well as having to live carry out a lot of your work on conference calls day in day out for the last 12 months at least, is a bit of a struggle, and we really appreciate everyone that takes the time to join in, even if it's just for a part of the day. So once again, thank you very much. And with that, we'll hand over to playing Pac-Man for the next couple of hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Pac-Man is live, and I'm ashamed for everyone watching this that no one said, Dean, why don't you just back up the instance before you delete it again to make sure we don't lose all of our beautiful scores for this keyring.
I didn't want to show you up.
I know. Thanks, Linda. I do appreciate it. I will come back again because of that.
I did have a very quick question about Caston. Presumably, you need to have storage that supports the snapshot type mechanism. So if you're just doing it on a sort of a homebrew Raspberry Pis with NFS.
So homebrew Raspberry Pi, if you're using vanilla Kubernetes, the vanilla CSI driver should support snapshots. It's just
interesting. So if you're going to build a K3s cluster or something like that.
Yeah. So if even deploying tons of Kubernetes, if you decide to not use the underlying vSphere storage, if you're running it on vSphere, the CSI, you would use whatever the relevant CSI driver is. So if you deploy tons of Kubernetes grid into AWS, you use the AWS storage interface, CSI, to interface with their S3 buckets, for example. They would support snapshotting, so Caston would just use that snapshotting. It's just the fact that because we're using underlying vSphere storage, our vSphere CSI today does not support snapshots.
Oh, okay, that's cool. No, it looks like quite a neat little product.
It's not bad. That's why I invited Michael along today, you see, so his happy smiling face with it. And I think he also wanted to see whether people would beat him or not.
I was winning until we told everyone the address. Jeez.
This competition thing. Honestly. I'm supposed to be on a call.
So I can see Bradshaw's put up as his thing, like his actual screen, and I'm wondering there whether he's actually playing or whether he's game over.